Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being on my program. Today's is part of the series of Tomorrow Whispers. I have two outstanding guests on the program. I'm very, very happy and very proud and very honored to have them both on the show. I've known both of them for years now. I've been impressed with their work, their insights, their emails, their questions, their inquiries about the whole world of AI. Well, I posed the question, is AI a threat to human creativity? Well, who are the two better persons to answer here on today's show who are both writers in their own right, authors, poets, and influentials in their own fields. And they have made a splash in the world of literacy, and not only on the points that they put out for the public, but just in their conversations and ideas that they share with each other. So today we have with us Dr. Carolyn Clark, Ph.D., and Mary Langer Thompson, Ed.D. Doctorate in Education as well. Thank you, ladies, for being on the show today.
Hello.
There you
Hello.
go.
Glad to be here. Oops.
Well, let me give you a little bit of background on each one of them. Their resumes are very, very long, and the number of books that they've published is really tremendous. We want to recognize at this time Dr. Thelma Reyna. Want to say hi. She has her publishing company, Golden Foothills Publications in Pasadena. So I want to thank her because she's the one that helped put us together. And she's just raved about both of you, and I can see why now. And thank you very much for being on our show. So let's begin. First of all, let me bring in Carolyn Clark, PhD. She was born in Ithaca, New York, which she is right now, and she has lived abroad. She studied classics in Cornell, Brown, and Johns Hopkins. Recent poetry publications include poems from Curti, Watershed, New Finger Lakes Poems, and on and on and on. Wonderful. You need to find her information in her books, and you will not regret any of it. You will be moved on it. Dr. Clark is a devoted teacher, writing woodland lyric poetry, and finds mythology everywhere. And she has helped me to figure that out too. So thank you for those lessons in mythology as well.
Hello. Great introduction. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here again.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Our second guest is Mary Langer Thompson. She has her doctorate in education in 2012, Poet Laureate of California, and has been nominated for a Pushcart Prize. She is the author of Poems in Water and several poetry chapbooks, two children books, and on and on and on. It's just wonderful work. She is a retired secondary English teacher and public school principal with a doctorate in curriculum and the instruction from UCLA. I didn't go to USC, so there's no issues on the show on that one. So. Let's pose the question, first of all, to Carolyn Clark, where the question is, will AI make our creative writing muscles atrophy?
Atrophy is an important word because it means turning away from wellness. And I believe it will have that effect on particularly the younger generation that's growing up with AI as its nursemaid, if you will. But it's also going to have its effect on people now who want to write because they won't be getting it from themselves. For creative writing, that's particularly important. And the mimicry that will go on because we're basically feeding AI will be contagious, if you will. So I do believe it will have a different anticipated effect on creative writing as opposed to some of its other uses. I think particularly writing and art will have a very difficult regeneration, if you will.
Thank you very much. Dr. Thompson?
Well, the jury is still out for me. I keep hearing about AI in everyday conversations now. Ever since you brought it up, it seems like everybody's interested in it. And one of my English teacher friends at the end of last year said that every essay that was turned in was AI generated. And so she and the principal made them rewrite it instead of accepting that. They destroyed them and made the students rewrite. I think that AI or MI, that would be machine intelligence, can be a prompt to help creativity. And I've seen that in my own Poemsmiths, which is my critique group that meets twice a week. I founded the Poemsmiths of the Mojave High Desert about 9 years ago. And last Saturday, we were asked to present the program for the California Writers Club. So we had 7 different stations and looked at different forms of poetry. And the 50 members that were attending rotated throughout our stations to learn these different forms of poetry. And one of the ones that I taught was erasure poetry, and where you take a text and you black out what you don't want, and you're left with a poem. And that very issue came up that, well, isn't this plagiarism? Which I was glad that that came up, because we talked about how if you have too many words that you took from the text, then maybe you want to reword or leave those out and change them. Just make sure that what is left has meaning and the meaning you want to convey, and that you carefully revise and don't use too many words, because then you are going into the plagiarism state. But after this event, and we had other poetry, such as writing from free writing and a metaphor dice, where we created imagery and metaphors and similes, and an ekphrastic poem where you write from art. And I had even a call last night. This woman called me and said, "Can I read my poems to you? I didn't consider myself a poet." She said, "But these words just came to me. I was at the doctor's office and she read these beautiful poems." I thought, wow. So afterwards, people told me, I didn't think I was a poet, but I got inspired. Maybe I am. So I'm rethinking that. I think only the lazy people, like students who just want to get a grade or don't want their own voice to be heard, they don't care. They won't be the English majors or the poets of the future. I think only they will be using the AI in those ways. I think that it can actually be helpful to some to say, well, they gave me, machine intelligence gave me that idea, but I'm going to go with it and make it my own. That's my hope.
Now I'm going to open it for discussion between all of us. And one of the questions that comes up, and you alluded to it, I always think of a percentage. I always want to ask a percentage. At what percent is something in literary or written format? At what point is it original? And at what percentage does it lose originality using machine learning? So, example, so I use 20% of it from ideas that I got from the chat GPT, and the 80 is mine. Is that percentage workable for it not to be cheating, if you will?
I leave that to Mary to answer because as a principal, you probably had to deal with that issue quite a lot. Perhaps not, but plagiarism conventionally, you opened up that mention. So, I mean, plagiarism has been around for millennia.
So,
True. I don't know that you can give it a percentage. And I think that with poetry too, we ask that for our poemsmiths, when they come to the critique group, don't bring something that's been published. You've already got the seal of approval on that. We want rough drafts. We want raw stuff. And I think with poetry, you have to let it sit for a while, usually, and then keep coming back to it. And then you leave it, and then maybe you're doing something else. You're cooking, you're taking a shower, and you think, oh, I'm going to replace that word. I just thought of a better word that would fit in there. So poetry isn't an instant, I'll sit down and write a poem like you sit down and write an article, at least for me. it's kind of an ongoing thing until I reach that sense of completion and that it is mine.
Okay, I understand what you're sharing about the writer site. Okay, let me look at the reader site. Do the readers, and this is a general question, do the readers really care, or are they interested to find out the amount of struggle the poet went through to write it? So, do they really care whether it came out of a human or whether it came out of a machine if you don't tell them either one?
Probably not. If it touches them, the reader probably doesn't care. So I think the ethics belong to the writer.
I think the reader cares a lot about whether it's a machine generated poem or a human generated poem, because I don't think we've reached that stage yet of people not knowing the difference. It's going to get harder and harder probably as machines become more sophisticated to know the difference. But just because I'm dealing every week with personal poems I write for people, they so appreciate the knowing who the poet is and seeing the poem emerge in front of their eyes. So I do know that, in fact, connection is really important, and that they idealize a lot of poets that they love. Certainly, it would be hard to idealize a machine in the sense of get connected to what they represent and what they have lived through, perhaps. So I just hope that the distinction between human and machine poetry will somehow survive.
Well, in the beginning, I didn't have a critique group, but now I rarely send things out that don't go through my human critique group. And because they see things that I don't see, we have established certain rules of poetry, not really in stone, but we have to explain when somebody new comes to the group that there are certain words that are empty, words like soul, words like joy, if they don't have some context around them that's specific. And we try to stay away from some of those words. And it seems like when we have a new person, and it takes courage to bring a poem, I think, to a group, but it's very personal. And I don't see a lot of my poets once they get started going to AI for help or prompts. I think that's for the beginner who it may help them fall in love with poetry. But if you have that human context, we're going to tell you, that this doesn't work or this doesn't touch me or may not touch other readers. And so you've got the emotion and the intellect that I don't think AI can give you, at least not at this point.
Let me bring in an item for the discussion. I have asked ChatGPT to write something, and I pretty much by the end, when I pose my question, hit the request button. It takes about 3 to 5 seconds to get a response. Okay. Now, what I'm getting at with that example is theoretically, a very small group of people could be asking AI, ChatGPT, to put out poetry. So theoretically, in a month, they could bombard the entire world of poetry with all this fake poetry that was written, generated through a machine, to a point where there's a flooding of poetry books, poetry make-believe authors, etc., where after a while, I can't pick up a book and says, oh, this was AI or this was a person. So I'm forced to ask the question, does that dilute the value of poetry? Because it's not just writing it, it's also sharing it.
I think sharing poetry comes in many different media, and I like the fact that there are so many different ways to share now. The platform makes a difference, and I always encourage poets to put things out whatever way works best for their community, for themselves, for whoever's reading. I just say I always would prefer printed books. My daughter-in-law gave me this. There's my little segue there. It's so much fun because I grew up with paper. And so for me, paper and carbon paper and copy machines all was part of what I had, a tactile sense of poetry, a book in one's hand. And some people don't have that opportunity anymore, but that won't stop them from sharing poetry. And particularly the spoken word, so exciting. Now we have so many different venues for giving the spoken word, sharing poetry. So I'm all about using technology to share poetry, as long as the credit is given to whoever's due, just like with songwriting. The person who covers the poem should give credit to the song, the person who created it. So there's wonderful analogies with songwriting and poetry and art too, all going on at the same time here. But to restrict it, I distinguish between machine intelligence creating something and sharing it. Totally different things.
So do you think they will ever reach a point where machine learning will produce poetry or books as
Oh,
good or if
yes.
not better than humans?
I think they will be better than a lot of humans, no doubt, because eventually, I mean, our minds are all being harvested now. Every data, even a student who's submitting, like Khan Academy has a new tutorial program now, and there's a lot of data leaks that go in to that data bank, if you will, to create the tutorial process. And the same thing will happen inevitably with poetry and all these other art forms, that machines will get better at it. But the problem is we have to make sure that there's no censorship. How does it work? Who gets the credit? Where did the idea come from? And erasure poems, ekphrastic poems, using metaphor dice, that's one I hadn't heard of. But these are all games people have played for a long time. And it's not good to credit the machine learning with coming up with those games. People did that. And it's great that you can do it on Zoom or in person, whatever is needed. But I do want to be sure you know how there is a difference, and we'll know it. Maybe the next generation won't, which is frightening to me.
About machine intelligence taking our identity away. Some of us want to leave a legacy as well. And so
Yes.
if they don't credit us in the future, our identity is gone too. So that's a problem.
What I'm hearing is an issue of ethics,
Mhm.
of the idea of people, being recognized and somebody being ethical enough to say, no, this was AI generated, machine
Mhm.
generated versus a human. And if that falls apart, then where do we go from there?
Right. I think it starts with the teachers in the classroom too, um, talking about giving credit to others for not just poetry, but for, we build on those in the past. We build on their skills. We build on their ideas from the past.
Yes, and just to follow up on that, at all levels, even college now, I'm hearing that exams are the only way, exams in person are the only way that professors or teachers can know if a student is actually producing the work. So they can be assigned papers, even at graduate school level, but unless they actually sit for an exam without a phone, without a computer, and write, compose, whether it's on their laptop or not, I guess it would be handwritten now. They've got that in place so that they can be sure that the students are up to what they say they are up to, if you know what I'm saying. So that's now become, I can't remember if it was UMass Boston or Boston University, but it was somewhere, it's on the radar everywhere, that that's the only way to be sure that people have writing skills. And imagine trying to do that for a poem. That would be very hard to do for most people. As you say, poems are a labor of love in a sense, that it takes longer for you to edit it. And you might be in a random moment in your life, having put down that poem, come back to it, and then edit it yourself. It's a process. So it would be hard for most people to write a poem right on the spot. I mean, who would need that? Unless, you have that.
I hate to throw a monkey wrench into this point, but I think both of you as educators know that the kids aren't being taught to do cursive writing anymore. So so the day that says, okay, you're gonna write into a blue book,
Isn't it awful? They
they
must
don't
be
know
miserable.
how.
Yep. And they
That's
can
something that came
print.
to my mind. You take away their screens, they don't know how to write.
That's
Everything
right.
is.
Well,
So I think
government,
that
yes, go ahead.
I'm pretty sure I work in the school system here where I live every year for 10 years. And last year they were the first in New York State to eliminate phones in this very small rural school. You couldn't have your phone on all day.
Mhm.
And it was wonderful. The results really changed the social dynamic. And of course, people had their computers at their desks, but at least they didn't have the phone element as well. So they ended up using less phone help and distraction, certainly. But I would like to see an exam happen. I can't imagine these kids doing it if they haven't been given the skills to use a pencil, as you see on the back of your video there.
Oh,
Uh,
let me show it. Let me show it. So
oh,
is
how
AI.
interesting. You have two erasers. There's no point
Mhm.
erasing the mind.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
that's the initial question. Are we seeing atrophy of the mind where, I was made to think with the idea how our generation is looking at all this, but down the road, future generation, will they think it's important to be genuine? Will they think it's important for a human to write it? Let me change that statement a little bit. What if AI would decide in its own mysterious way to convince us, and we allow ourselves, that AI poetry is just as good, if not better, than humans, and we're wasting our time competing with it?
Well, I think that people always want something new and novel too. So, and they want to be, want their voice heard, their own individual voice heard. I don't think that will ever change.
The want won't change. The fear will increase given
Mhm.
what era people are living in, what location. It's already happened in many countries, of course, in the present and past, certainly. When I mention censorship, it's not something foreign. So I think the desire is always there, like you say. So hopefully people will continue to pursue finding their own voice and making it heard.
I'm learning that the individual writing the poetry is writing it out of motivation, whether it be fear or insights or however it comes. But on the other side, the public as a whole, I don't know what their reaction is or how they're receptive to, again, the issue of originality. And unless I think the only way I can see a solution to this, or partial, is to actually have more settings where the actual human is reading the poetry, where we want to look at that. Maybe we can't depend just on books. Maybe we want to see them in video reading their own poetry. And I think if we do that, then we're going back to the original source. And I think books or magazines and poetry tend to confuse us. But so far, eventually we will be able to make a copy of both of you and have them read your poetry and say, they're not real either. But that's a whole different issue. I'm not going there right now. But I think having you on the show and knowing that both of you are real and having two wonderful poets in other shows as well, like yourselves and others, I think that's the part that we need to hold on to because everything else can be manipulated.
Yes, our poem smiths, and you brought up spoken poetry too, Carolyn. And that wasn't a tradition that I was brought up in, but our poemsmiths were invited to read our poetry. And one of our poemsmiths was really, really good at spontaneous poetry. And we recognized her talent, and we started questioning ourselves and saying, we have to read with more expression. This is a whole nother avenue of poetry. And some of us state English teachers need to get out there and do better at that. And there are audiences for spoken poetry. So that's
Absolutely.
encouraging.
It's very encouraging. And Poetry Slam has been around forever. It's wonderful events that, people can sit in the audience. If it's a real live audience, like it was for me in Bethesda, I was part of the audience. I think actually I did one too. But I mean, the creative way of reading, the awesome idiom that people put into their poems, everything is so wonderfully alive. And I'm sure that's going to be a popular event for in person or across different media. It's a good contest spirit also.
I see that as being the solution to today's question. Obviously, not 100%, but it's a start. Where why don't we go directly to the source? Or like you shared, maybe we can encourage each writer to actually get in front of the camera and explain their ideas, explain their books, and also may have the opportunity to say, I didn't write that. That has my name on it, but I didn't write that, and be able to put their case up in front of all of us. And I think as humans, I'm going to be hopeful that the idea that humans will lend themselves over and says, I want the real ones. I'm tired of, what I'm getting over the internet. I want the original point. I want to associate a face with the works.
Well, and to take the machine generated one and make it your own, just like Hamilton was made into poetry and music brought in based on a biography of Hamilton. So that's what's called ekphrastic poetry, art based on other art. So maybe we have to look at the AI generated as another form of art, but you can build on that. You can make it your own. You can take an experience that and see the machine won't hit until the machine gets a memory, then it's not going to be able to generate personal memories. But when it gets a memory, their poetry will improve too. But that won't be the personal memory of the poet that wants to write a poem, if that makes any sense.
I'm going to have to think about that one all the way through. And again, the near future, I know there are systems that want to download your brain into the computer so that if your body passes, the machine continues supposedly your thoughts and your ideas and your emotion. Again, that's a different issue. We won't go there today. But gosh, does anyone have a poem that fits today's conversation or a book or something?
Well, I'll read one of my erasure poems because I took it from the Psalms. And that's another thing about copyright. If it's 70 years or more, you can borrow it. Anyway, I took Psalm 1 and you can go on the computer and erase with colored ink instead of a Sharpie. So I did that, and it says, delight in law, his law, meditate like a tree in season, prosper, stand. So it's very short, but like I told the poem smiths the other day, if you're satisfied, if you feel there's enough of your voice and what you want to say in it, and I give credit to the Psalms.
That was really nice. In my poetry group, I have two of them. Another woman did an erasure poem, and it was of political nature, and it was about women's rights. And she took one of the amendments and took out words from the amendment and created this amazing poem. And yours was so beautiful. I wanted you to read it twice. Um, Maybe you can circle back to it because for me, this issue of AI, we call it machine intelligence too, started a long time ago, and particularly was important during COVID, the development of it during COVID. I think the need for machines, it's all about trying to find a way to keep civilization and the stock market going and without a crash again. And I think a lot of the reason we are having this rush towards AI, machine intelligence, is that we had this 2020 experience. And what I read from it was like I'm an editor too, and I was reading something with the word untact. And untact is actually a word that was coined in Korea, in South Korea. It evokes the word intact. And it's a dream economy where distance workers, COVID-free, keep pace with automation. So here it is, the poem that was published in 2022 in a journal called Plain Songs. Untact. These were once my keywords: dactylic hexameter, epic poetry, Homeric heroes, word cadences, lost pitch of song. And my precious digs? Nausicaa, a princess washing, singing the river clean, laughter matrilineal. Now far gone are those shining epithets, patronymics too, replaced by machines. Today, editing, I find a new word freshly flagged: untact, stet. Coined in South Korea, it invokes intact, a dream economy where distance workers, COVID-free, keep pace with automation. No touch, no share, no breath, not smell, not taste. You can work from anywhere. But as dirty laundry, plastics, acronyms all keep piling up in swirling islands somewhere in the Pacific, there's a vision of a new world with more and more AI, artificial intelligence. I, how quickly we mourn loss. Who will take in clothes and shrouds, fresh, sun-dried? Estuaries, will they ever again be clean? Who will greet the heroes coming home? And Nausicaa, who knew her name meant all along the burner of ships?
Wow.
Powerful, very powerful.
Mhm.
It's a longer poem than what you read, and I don't apologize for it, but most of my poems are shorter or one page, so they can fit in a book.
I
These, yeah.
Beautiful.
I just want to say thank you for letting me read that. I wasn't sure you wanted to hear that, but to
oh
me,
no no
COVID
no
was an
No.
experience that I lost my mother during COVID and I could not touch her when she was very ill. And I last saw her through a window and she was 93 and she was a poet too. And she kept
Oh.
saying, "We're going to get through this." That was the thing she would always say, "We're going to get through this."
Wow.
And she did get through it her own way, because she was always very loving. And I think the human touch is very important. So we need to keep that in mind when AI develops. Its machine intelligence is not touch.
Right. And your loss of I, that line was really powerful. Beautiful.
What I continuously learn, and this is the greatest benefit of, being here and having you on the show. The greatest benefit is for me to see things in a new way, and you've done that today. And I'd like you to give you time to summarize your perspective on what we've shared today. But I'll quickly mention mine, is that even if all kids, all generations go through the process of just using machine learning, the chat GPT, to generate poetry, there will be a certain percentage that will turn it off and will write on their own just because it's in them, just because it's
Hmm.
innate in them. I think it's we're wired to be poets. Whether we acknowledge it or not is a different issue. I think we're all humanly oriented toward being writers, storytellers, through books or through poetry. And so I'm hopeful that these individuals will continue to come to the surface. The other ones may drop off and go off to something else. But now I see that creativity is going to come to the surface. Even if people are using AI all the time, we are wired to be creative. And I use both of you as an example where, yes, you know you can use AI, but you feel the need to write and share.
Yes, I think that is an inborn quality. And I'm fine. And development too, human development. I don't think machine intelligence is going to develop unless we just use it for our own creativity and not let it go off on its own. And it might be popular if there are books done, but only for a while. I think we want that novelty always. And ethics is a part of it too that you brought up. And I know when I was in college, that Yeats poem about, I think it was Yeats, you have to separate the dance from the dancer. But as I grow older, I can't do that. I've read some biographies of some poets and writers who have been horrible. And when I go back to their work, it colors the way I read it. I can't help it.
For my poetry book club, I love looking at the links to the videos with the poets reading at their events because it changes the way I read their poetry too.
Mhm.
So it is nice to have that automation available. But that's real, again, real people, and that's just sharing the
Mhm.
media, and it changes the way you see it. But imagine if, like, a robot read it. Maybe some robot poet will become very popular someday if it ever gets to that point in time, beyond my lifetime, I should think. Maybe not. But I mean, we are all prepared for this through the films like Star Wars. What's wrong with R2D2 being your friend? And, everybody, we might make it to Mars. I mean, all these concepts, people are so prepared for outer space. But what about their inner space? Where are they going to harvest those poems if everything they do just is turned over to someone else to make? I mean, imagine a child, instead of finding words and babbling himself, and learning to make Dr. Seuss style poetry, and then gradually growing up with different, more sophisticated rhyme schemes. Imagine if they just were given like machine learned poetry from the get-go, no human voice, but
Mhm.
sophisticated machine learning became their, if you will, not sanctuary, but became their nursery, if you will.
Mhm.
It will change things.
Mhm.
It will not be the same. And I don't want to see humans devalued by machine learning. I always have Brave New World in 1984 and all that history of,
Mhm.
the dystopian future that people write about so often. I don't think it's so much a future as it is a present. It's already happening. So we have to be on guard. And I have a favorite saying, which is, who will guard the guards,
Mhm.
right? And it's from Juvenal, the satirist who wrote at a terrible time of the Roman Empire, quis custodiet custodes ipsos. And we are the custodians. Like you were saying, Mary, there's a legacy we want to live on and pass on to generations what it is to be human.
Mhm.
Creative writing is certainly part of that.
I was asked recently what education should look like in the future, being that a lot of jobs will be taken over and we don't need to train kids anymore to go to school and get a good job. And thinking through that question, I came up with the answer that we're actually may go back to teaching like they did in the Greek times, where liberal arts is probably the only field that's taught because you don't need to learn, how to, put bricks together or how to build a building and all that. There will be some details that will be needed for humans, but that true education in the future will actually be liberal arts, where people will sit down and will be asked to write poetry and create music, even though they can't sing or dance, or just play and let that experience go through. So I see the future being moving toward human poetry, human stories, human books, regardless how much AI may continue to evolve. That's my take on it.
Yes. And I think poetry can be a help for loneliness too, which is going to increase as we get more and more technological. And England actually has made a minister of loneliness position in the government.
Wow.
And I think poetry can help with that if loneliness increases.
Right up the alley with Untact, because when you have you go through the entire day in some urban areas of parts of the world, you can go through and order food without ever seeing or talking to a human being. And this is when you're not like in, not to mention a retired person going to try to be seen by nurses and doctors. It's becoming more and more prevalent to use just the video chat. As we know, there's not enough, there's a shortage. So we justify it that way. But loneliness is a product of this unreal machinery intelligence that we're creating. So I hope that that loneliness position will be made more visible across the world so that people will deal with the byproduct of all of this machine learning that we're engaged in.
Wow. I've learned a lot, and you've given me a lot to think about. And you ladies never fail to give me new perspectives to think on, and that's wonderful. And I go away more hopeful. And I'm astounded how wonderful, how many lessons I've learned, and how much homework I have to think through. But as we close the show, I'd like to hear your closing terms.
Well, I think about how Thoreau, a poet, said that he wanted to go to the woods and live deliberately. And I think we have to hope deliberately that machine intelligence will not take over everything, that creative writing will have a new upsurge, and that maybe machine intelligence will even help us with prompts to go in that direction.
I like that deliberate hope deliberately. It's a wonderful concept. I think that's to segue on what Mary was saying. I think hope is the thing that makes humans so special because many generations have looked the same out at the same window. In the darkest of times, hope has always been the way through progress, the way of survival. And when you take away hope and when you take away voice, when you say to people, no, you're not allowed to say this, no, you're not allowed to use a typewriter in a square without absolute permission or a blessing of a king or whatever emperor. And this happens even now. We have the problem of freedom and hope. They go together. And being able to say things and write things that are controversial is part of hope and newness too. So I hope that, there we go, I hope that future generations will embrace and safeguard their ability to express themselves. And it's all part of the same thing, whether it is art, as in paints and sculpture, or if it's finding your voice through words, translations. You don't have to be lost in translation. It's all out there. And I really appreciate that you can do this more easily if you nurture it, and nurturing self-reliance. So the robot is not erasing your abilities, as in the mind behind Armando, but instead perhaps spurring on your ideas. As Mary was first saying, we can use technology as a tool to help us develop higher level skills for everyone. That would be a great adventure.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being on our program here today. Tomorrow Whispers, we've been dealing with the question, will AI make our creative writing muscles atrophy? It will if we allow it to. It's from what I'm learning. If we don't make our position a priority to ourselves. Humans first, robots second. We give up our right to be human, not that it's taken away. That's what I've learned so far from hearing your words, and I'll continue to think it through. There's a lot to really reflect on as well. So I thank you both. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had Carolyn Clark, Ph.D., and Mary Langer Thompson, a doctorate in education, share with us their personal views and giving up of their time to be on our show and say it directly from their voice to us rather than through AI or some other form. Thank you very much for having both of you on the show, and I look forward to having you back again real soon.
Thank you.